In the primordial time when the world was young, before the sacred rhythms awakened the spirits and called forth the Orishas, the realm of humanity existed in profound silence. The people of Earth lived their daily lives without the divine communication that would later transform their spiritual practice and connection to the celestial realm of Orun, where the divine beings resided in eternal harmony. Obatala, the great Orisha of wisdom, purity, and creation, observed from his celestial throne the limitation this silence imposed upon human spiritual development. The people possessed souls capable of profound spiritual connection, but they lacked the sacred language that could bridge the gap between earthly consciousness and divine awareness. Their prayers rose like whispers into the cosmic void, barely reaching the ears of the Orishas. In the divine realm, spiritual communication flowed effortlessly through pure consciousness, requiring no physical medium to convey meaning, emotion, or intention. The Orishas communicated through direct transmission of spiritual energy, their thoughts and feelings merging in perfect understanding. However, humans, bound by physical bodies and limited by material consciousness, needed tangible methods to achieve similar spiritual communion. The absence of sacred sound in human spiritual practice created a significant barrier to the development of genuine religious experience. While humans could offer physical sacrifices and perform ritual movements, their ceremonies lacked the vibrational power necessary to pierce the veil between dimensions and establish meaningful contact with divine consciousness. Obatala recognized that sound, particularly rhythmic sound, possessed unique properties that could serve as a bridge between the physical and spiritual realms. Rhythm existed as a fundamental principle throughout creation, in the beating of hearts, the cycles of seasons, the movement of celestial bodies, and the very pulse of life itself. This natural rhythm could provide the foundation for sacred communication. The wise Orisha understood that humanity needed not just any form of musical expression, but specifically designed sacred instruments that could channel divine energy and facilitate authentic spiritual communion. These instruments would need to be created with divine blessing, constructed according to sacred principles, and used only for the highest spiritual purposes. Chapter 2. The Divine Council. Recognizing the magnitude of creating sacred instruments for human spiritual development, Obatala convened a council of the most influential Orishas to discuss this momentous undertaking. Each divine being brought their unique perspective and domain of influence to consider how sacred sound could best serve humanity's spiritual evolution and maintain proper connection between earthly and celestial realms. Shango, the powerful Orisha of thunder, lightning, and divine justice, spoke first about the relationship between sound and spiritual power. His domain over thunder had taught him that specific frequencies and rhythmic patterns could carry divine energy across vast distances, penetrating physical barriers and awakening spiritual consciousness in ways that ordinary sound could not achieve. Sacred sound must carry authority, Shango declared, his voice resonating with the power of celestial storms. When humans call upon us through proper rhythm, we must be able to hear and respond immediately. The instruments they use must be capable of transmitting not only their words, but also the sincere intention and spiritual energy behind their prayers. Taste Oya, the fierce Orisha of winds and transformation, contributed her understanding of how sound travels through different elements and environments. Her mastery over air currents had shown her that properly created vibrations could carry spiritual messages across any distance, reaching the divine realm regardless of physical obstacles or earthly limitations. Yemoja, the nurturing mother of waters and protector of children, emphasized the healing and protective properties that sacred sound could provide. These instruments must not only call us to ceremony, she observed, but also have the power to heal emotional wounds, provide comfort during times of sorrow, and create sacred spaces where spiritual transformation can occur safely. Eshu, the messenger Orisha who traveled freely between all realms, offered crucial insights about the communication aspects of sacred instruments. His experience facilitating divine human contact had shown him that successful spiritual communication required precise protocols and properly consecrated tools to ensure accuracy and prevent misunderstanding. Ogun, the master of iron and craftsmanship, volunteered his expertise in the physical creation of these sacred instruments. His knowledge of materials, construction techniques, and the spiritual properties of different substances would be essential for creating instruments capable of channeling divine energy while maintaining durability for generations of use. Chapter 3. The Sacred Materials. The creation of sacred drums required careful selection of materials that possessed both physical properties, suitable for musical instruments, and spiritual qualities, capable of channeling divine energy. Obatala, drawing upon his vast knowledge of creation secrets, guided the selection process to ensure that every component would contribute to the instrument's sacred purpose. The wood chosen for drum bodies had to come from trees that had achieved spiritual significance through age, location, or natural properties. Sacred groves where the Orishas had walked, trees that had stood witness to important spiritual events, or wood from species known to possess natural spiritual resonance, were considered appropriate sources for this divine construction project. Each tree selected for sacred drum construction required proper spiritual preparation before harvesting. Prayers were offered to honor the tree's sacrifice, rituals were performed to ensure the wood retained its spiritual essence, and specific techniques were used to preserve the natural energetic properties that would enhance the instrument's ability to facilitate divine communication. The animal skins chosen for drumheads required equally careful consideration and spiritual preparation. Only animals that had lived full, natural lives and died in accordance with cosmic harmony were considered suitable. The spiritual relationship between the animal kingdom and divine consciousness meant that these skins would carry the life force and spiritual essence of the creatures that had worn them. Ogun supervised the crafting process, ensuring that every cut, joining, and finishing technique contributed to the instrument's spiritual potency rather than diminishing it. Traditional methods that honored both the materials and their intended purpose were employed, with modern shortcuts or purely commercial considerations being completely avoided in favor of sacred authenticity. The consecration of materials involved elaborate rituals that infused each component with divine blessing and spiritual purpose. Prayers, offerings, and ceremonial procedures transformed ordinary wood and hide into sacred substances capable of channeling divine energy and facilitating communication between earthly and celestial consciousness. Additional materials such as ropes, decorative elements, and ceremonial accessories were selected according to the same spiritual criteria. Every aspect of the drum's construction reflected the understanding that these instruments would serve as conduits for divine presence and must therefore embody the highest standards of spiritual purity and energetic alignment. Chapter 4. The First Sacred Rhythm. When the first sacred drums were completed according to divine specifications, the moment arrived to establish the fundamental rhythms that would serve as the foundation for all future sacred music in Yoruba tradition. This was not merely a musical creation, but a cosmic event that would determine how humans could effectively communicate with divine consciousness for generations to come. Obatala himself took up the first completed drum, feeling the spiritual energy contained within its sacred construction flow through his divine consciousness. The instrument responded to his touch with vibrations that extended far beyond mere physical sound, creating resonances that echoed through multiple dimensions and established harmonic connections between earthly and celestial realms. The first rhythm that emerged from Obatala's divine playing was simple yet profound, a steady, heartbeat-like pattern that reflected the fundamental pulse of life itself. This basic rhythm would become the foundation upon which all other sacred rhythms would be built, representing the cosmic heartbeat that sustained all existence and connected every living being to the source of life. As Obatala continued to play, other Orishas joined in with their own instruments, each contributing rhythmic patterns that reflected their unique spiritual domains and energetic signatures. Shango's thunder-like beats, Oya's wind-swift patterns, Yemoja's flowing water rhythms, and Eshu's complex communication signals wove together into a magnificent symphony of divine sound. The combined rhythm created by the assembled Orishas established the template for sacred ceremonial music that would guide human spiritual practice. Each Orisha's distinctive rhythmic signature provided humans with a musical language for calling upon specific divine energies and establishing connection with particular aspects of spiritual consciousness. This first divine drumming session also revealed important principles about sacred rhythm that would guide future human practice. The music demonstrated how individual rhythmic patterns could maintain their integrity while blending harmoniously with others, creating unity without sacrificing diversity, a fundamental principle of cosmic harmony and spiritual community. The power of this first sacred rhythm was so great that its vibrations reached Earth immediately, awakening spiritual sensitivity in humans who had never before experienced such direct divine communication. People across the world felt stirrings of spiritual awareness as the cosmic rhythm penetrated their consciousness and called forth their innate capacity for divine connection. Chapter 5. Teaching the first drummers. Recognizing that humans would need proper instruction to use these sacred instruments effectively, Obatala descended to Earth to personally train the first generation of sacred drummers. These chosen individuals would become the guardians of divine rhythmic knowledge and the teachers who would ensure accurate transmission of sacred musical tradition across generations. The selection of the first sacred drummers required careful attention to spiritual readiness, natural musical ability, and moral character. Obatala sought individuals who demonstrated not only rhythmic talent, but also the wisdom to understand that sacred drumming was a form of divine service, requiring humility, respect, and complete dedication to spiritual principles. The training process extended far beyond mere technical instruction in drumming techniques. Students learned about the spiritual significance of each rhythm, the proper ceremonial contexts for different musical patterns, and the responsibilities that came with serving as conduits for divine energy through sacred sound. Obatala taught that sacred drumming required a state of spiritual preparation that aligned the drummer's consciousness with divine will. This preparation involved purification rituals, prayer, meditation, and the cultivation of emotional states that facilitated clear transmission of spiritual energy through rhythmic expression. The first drummers learned that their instruments were not merely musical tools but sacred objects that required proper care, respect, and ritual attention. Specific procedures for maintaining the drum's spiritual potency, protecting them from contamination, and ensuring their continued effectiveness as channels for divine communication were carefully transmitted. Advanced instruction included learning to recognize and respond to spiritual presences during ceremony, adjusting rhythmic patterns according to divine guidance, and facilitating the spiritual experiences of community members through appropriate musical support. These skills required years of practice and spiritual development to master fully. The relationship between drummer and instrument was revealed to be a sacred partnership requiring mutual respect and energetic harmony. Drummers learn to communicate with their instruments spiritually, understanding each drum's unique personality and capabilities, and working together to create the most effective channels for divine presence. Chapter 6. The Language of the Drums. As the sacred drumming tradition developed under Obatala's guidance, it became clear that the drums were developing their own sophisticated language, a complex system of rhythmic communication that could convey specific meanings, emotions, and spiritual intentions with remarkable precision and clarity. This rhythmic language operated on multiple levels simultaneously. The basic beats corresponded to fundamental spiritual concepts and energy patterns, while more complex combinations created detailed messages that could communicate specific prayers, invocations, stories, and spiritual teachings without the use of words. Each Orisha developed their own distinctive rhythmic vocabulary within this larger system. Practitioners learned to recognize the specific drum patterns associated with each divine being, understanding how these rhythms could call forth particular spiritual energies, invoke specific blessings, or facilitate connection with different aspects of divine consciousness. The drums also learned to speak human language in a unique way, using rhythmic patterns that mimic the tonal qualities and rhythmic structure of Yoruba speech. This capability allowed drummers to communicate complex verbal messages through pure rhythm, creating a parallel language that existed entirely in the realm of sacred sound. Emotional communication through drumming became particularly sophisticated, with specific rhythmic patterns capable of evoking and channeling virtually any human emotion or spiritual state: joy, sorrow, reverence, celebration, petition, gratitude, and countless other emotional qualities could be expressed and transmitted through carefully crafted rhythmic sequences. The drums developed the ability to facilitate group consciousness and spiritual unity during ceremonial gatherings. Specific rhythms could synchronize the heartbeats and brainwaves of participants, creating states of collective consciousness that enhanced spiritual experience and facilitated profound community bonding. Advanced practitioners learned to use drumming for healing purposes, employing specific rhythmic patterns to address physical ailments, emotional imbalances, and spiritual blockages. This therapeutic application of sacred rhythm became an important aspect of traditional healing practices and spiritual counseling. Chapter 7. Sacred Protocols and Ceremonies. Under Obatala's wise guidance, elaborate protocols developed around the use of sacred drums in ceremonial contexts. These protocols ensured that the powerful spiritual forces channeled through drumming were directed toward beneficial purposes and protected from misuse or corruption. The preparation for sacred drumming ceremonies required extensive purification of both drummers and instruments. Specific rituals cleansed the drums of any contaminating influences, charged them with divine energy, and established protective spiritual boundaries around the ceremonial space. Timing became crucial in sacred drumming, with certain rhythms appropriate only for specific times of day, seasons, or ceremonial contexts. The cosmic influences affecting Earth at different times required corresponding adjustments in drumming practices to maintain harmony between earthly activities and celestial energies. The sequence of rhythms within ceremonies followed divine patterns that facilitated progressive spiritual elevation and transformation. Opening rhythms prepared participants for spiritual experience. Middle sections facilitated deep communion with divine consciousness, and closing patterns grounded spiritual energy safely back into physical reality. Obatala established strict guidelines about who could play certain sacred rhythms and under what circumstances. Some patterns were considered so powerful that they required special initiation and spiritual preparation to use safely, while others could be employed more freely for general spiritual purposes. The relationship between drumming and other ceremonial elements, dancing, singing, offerings, and ritual actions was carefully coordinated to create harmonious spiritual experiences that honored all aspects of divine consciousness while serving the genuine needs of human spiritual development. Protocols also developed around the care and storage of sacred drums between ceremonies. These instruments required specific treatment to maintain their spiritual potency and protect them from energetic contamination that could interfere with their ability to channel divine presence effectively. Chapter 8. The Healing Power of Sacred Rhythm. One of the most remarkable discoveries about sacred drumming was its profound capacity for healing on multiple levels: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Obatala revealed that properly applied rhythmic patterns could address virtually any form of imbalance or disharmony affecting human well-being. Physical healing through drumming operated on the principle that disease and disorder resulted from disruptions in the natural rhythmic patterns that governed bodily functions. Sacred rhythms could restore proper energetic flow, synchronize biological processes, and stimulate the body's innate healing mechanisms. Emotional healing represented, perhaps, the most immediate and accessible application of drumming therapy. Specific rhythmic patterns could help individuals process trauma, release suppressed emotions, restore emotional balance, and develop greater resilience in facing life's challenges. Mental and psychological healing through drumming addressed issues of confusion, anxiety, depression, and various forms of mental distress. The rhythmic stimulation provided by sacred drumming could reorganize disordered thought patterns, calm agitated mental states, and facilitate clarity of consciousness. Spiritual healing through sacred rhythm addressed the deepest levels of human suffering: disconnection from divine consciousness, loss of meaning and purpose, and the existential confusion that resulted from forgetting one's true spiritual nature. Sacred drumming could restore awareness of divine presence and facilitate profound spiritual transformation. Community healing represented another important dimension of drumming therapy. Collective drumming sessions could address social tensions, restore community harmony, process collective trauma, and strengthen the bonds that united people in supportive spiritual fellowship. The training of healing drummers required extensive knowledge of both rhythmic techniques and healing principles. Practitioners learned to diagnose energetic imbalances, select appropriate rhythmic treatments, and monitor patients' responses to ensure safe and effective healing outcomes. Chapter 9. The drum's connection to ancestral wisdom. As the sacred drumming tradition matured, it became clear that the drums served as powerful conduits for connecting with ancestral wisdom and maintaining communication with those who had passed from physical existence into the realm of spiritual ancestors. Obatala revealed that the rhythmic patterns contained within sacred drumming carried the spiritual signatures of countless generations of practitioners who had used these same rhythms for spiritual purposes. Each time the drums were played properly, this accumulated wisdom became accessible to current practitioners. Ancestral spirits found the drum rhythms particularly conducive for communication with the living. The vibrational frequencies generated by sacred drumming created ideal conditions for spirits to manifest their presence and share guidance, warnings, blessings, or healing energy with their descendants. Specific rhythmic sequences were developed for facilitating ancestral communication during ceremonial contexts. These patterns served as invitations for ancestral presence while maintaining proper spiritual boundaries and ensuring that only benevolent spirits could participate in the sacred gathering. The drums themselves were understood to accumulate spiritual wisdom over time, with older instruments becoming increasingly powerful and spiritually sophisticated through their exposure to countless ceremonies and divine presences. Master drums that had served for generations became treasured repositories of spiritual knowledge. Drummers learned to recognize the subtle signs that indicated ancestral presence during ceremonies, changes in the drum's resonance, spontaneous variations in rhythm, or energetic shifts that signaled spiritual communication. These abilities required years of experience and spiritual sensitivity to develop fully. The ancestral dimension of drumming also included the transmission of technical knowledge and spiritual insights from master drummers of previous generations to current practitioners. This direct spiritual teaching supplemented formal instruction and ensured continuity of authentic tradition. Chapter 10. Sacred drumming in community life. The integration of sacred drumming into daily community life represented one of Obatala's greatest gifts to human society. Far from being confined to formal religious ceremonies, sacred rhythm became woven into the fabric of community existence, enhancing virtually every aspect of social interaction and cultural expression. Birth celebrations incorporated specific drumming patterns that welcomed new souls into the community, blessed them with divine protection, and introduced them to the rhythmic patterns that would guide their spiritual development throughout life. These inaugural rhythms established each child's connection to both divine consciousness and community support. Coming-of-age ceremonies used drumming to facilitate the spiritual transformations necessary for young people to assume adult responsibilities within the community. The rhythmic patterns employed during these transitions helped participants release childhood consciousness and embrace their mature spiritual potential. Marriage celebrations featured drumming that blessed the union of couples and harmonized their individual spiritual energies into a unified partnership. The rhythmic blessings invoked divine support for the relationship and integrated the newly formed family unit into the larger community structure. Seasonal celebrations and agricultural activities incorporated drumming that aligned community activities with cosmic rhythms and ensured divine blessing for planting, growing, and harvesting activities. These applications of sacred rhythm maintained harmony between human society and natural cycles. Conflict resolution and community healing used specific drumming patterns that calmed tensions, facilitated honest communication, and restored harmony when disputes or misunderstandings threatened community unity. The drums served as neutral mediators that helped all parties reconnect with their highest spiritual values. Funeral and memorial ceremonies employed drumming that honored the deceased, facilitated their transition to ancestral status, and provided comfort and healing for grieving community members. These rhythmic observances maintained connection between the living and the departed while supporting healthy processing of loss. Chapter 11. Preserving Sacred Tradition. As the sacred drumming tradition spread throughout Yoruba land and eventually beyond through migration and cultural exchange, maintaining the authenticity and spiritual power of the practice became an increasingly important concern that required careful attention and dedicated effort from committed practitioners. Obatala established specific criteria for identifying authentic sacred drumming and distinguishing it from mere musical entertainment or commercial performance. True sacred drumming required proper spiritual preparation, appropriate ceremonial context, genuine reverence for divine presence, and dedication to serving the spiritual needs of the community. The training and initiation of new drummers became formalized through traditional systems that ensured proper transmission of both technical skills and spiritual understanding. Master drummers took responsibility for identifying suitable candidates, providing comprehensive instruction, and certifying readiness for independent practice. Sacred instruments themselves required protection from commercialization and inappropriate use. Specific protocols developed around the creation, consecration, care, and eventual retirement of sacred drums to ensure that their spiritual power remained intact and available for authentic religious purposes. Documentation of rhythmic patterns, ceremonial procedures, and spiritual teachings became increasingly important as communities faced pressures from colonization, cultural disruption, and religious conversion. Elder practitioners worked to preserve essential knowledge through both oral tradition and carefully guarded written records. Adaptation to new environments and changing circumstances required careful balance between maintaining traditional authenticity and allowing for appropriate cultural evolution. Communities that migrated to different regions needed to adapt their practices while preserving the essential spiritual principles that gave sacred drumming its power. The establishment of sacred drum-making traditions ensured that new instruments could be created according to traditional specifications when older ones became unusable. Master craftspeople maintained the knowledge of proper materials, construction techniques, and consecration procedures necessary for creating spiritually effective instruments. Chapter 12. Global Influence and Modern Relevance. The influence of Yoruba. Sacred drumming traditions extended far beyond their original cultural boundaries, contributing to musical and spiritual practices throughout the African diaspora, and eventually influencing global consciousness about the spiritual power of rhythm and percussion. In the Americas, enslaved Africans carried their drumming traditions despite severe restrictions and persecution, adapting and preserving essential elements of sacred rhythm within new cultural contexts. These transplanted traditions became foundational elements of numerous musical and spiritual movements throughout the Western Hemisphere. The therapeutic applications of drumming, originally developed within Yoruba spiritual context, gained recognition in modern healing practices, music therapy, and psychological treatment. Contemporary research validated many traditional understandings about rhythm's effects on human consciousness, health, and well-being. Obatala's teachings about the spiritual significance of rhythm resonated with practitioners of many different religious and spiritual traditions who recognized universal principles within Yoruba drumming practices. This cross-cultural appreciation helped preserve and transmit sacred knowledge during periods when traditional practice faced suppression. Modern technology provided new opportunities for preserving, studying, and transmitting sacred drumming traditions while also creating new challenges about maintaining authenticity and preventing commercialization of sacred practices. Digital recording and global communication allowed for unprecedented documentation and sharing of traditional knowledge. Contemporary spiritual movements increasingly recognized the value of incorporating authentic sacred drumming into their practices, leading to renewed interest in traditional Yoruba teachings and increased respect for African spiritual traditions among diverse populations worldwide. The ecological consciousness embedded in traditional drumming practices, respect for natural materials, sustainable harvesting methods, and harmony with natural rhythms offered valuable perspectives for addressing contemporary environmental challenges and developing more sustainable relationships with the natural world. Chapter 13. The Eternal Rhythm. As we conclude this exploration of sacred drumming's divine origins, Obatala's eternal teaching emerges with crystal clarity. The rhythms that connect humanity to divine consciousness are not merely human creations but reflections of the cosmic rhythms that govern all existence and unite all beings in sacred harmony. The sacred drums continue to serve their original purpose in contemporary times, providing channels for divine communication, healing, community building, and spiritual transformation. Their power remains undiminished by the passage of time because they embody eternal principles that transcend cultural and historical boundaries. Each time sacred drums are played with proper reverence and spiritual preparation, they recreate the original divine communication that Obatala established between earthly and celestial consciousness. The rhythms carry forward the accumulated wisdom and spiritual energy of countless generations of practitioners who have used these sacred sounds for spiritual purposes. The preservation and authentic practice of sacred drumming represents more than cultural maintenance. It provides contemporary humanity with access to profound spiritual technologies that can address modern challenges while connecting people to timeless sources of wisdom and healing. Obatala's gift of sacred rhythm offers guidance for developing communities based on harmony, cooperation, and mutual support. The principles embedded in traditional drumming practices, unity within diversity, individual contribution to collective harmony, and service to the greater good, provide models for creating more just and peaceful societies. For individuals seeking spiritual development, sacred drumming offers a direct path to divine connection that bypasses intellectual barriers and facilitates immediate experience of spiritual consciousness. This accessibility makes the tradition particularly valuable for people seeking authentic spiritual experience in an increasingly complex world. The study and practice of sacred drumming, whether approached from musical, anthropological, therapeutic, or spiritual perspectives, reveals the sophisticated understanding of consciousness, healing, and human development that characterizes Yoruba traditional knowledge. This recognition contributes to growing appreciation for African contributions to global civilization. As humanity faces unprecedented challenges requiring wisdom, unity, and spiritual maturity, The teachings of Obatala and the sacred drumming tradition offer valuable resources for developing the consciousness and community bonds necessary to create positive transformation in our world. Thank you for joining us in exploring this profound spiritual tradition that continues to rhythm through hearts and souls around the world. The sacred drums remind us that we are all connected by the cosmic heartbeat that Obatala first revealed to humanity. Share in the comments where you're experiencing this wisdom from and how sacred rhythm has touched your own spiritual journey and understanding of divine connection.